Many people experience anxiety, that sudden wave that hits out of nowhere and makes everything feel heavier than it is. But sometimes, what feels like anxiety isn't just one thing. It's a system overload. Sometimes, it's what happens when identity, pressure, judgment, and fear all collide at once. And while the solution can feel distant or even impossible, the real shift often begins with something simpler than expected. Clarity. A few weeks ago, I sat across from a man whose nervous energy filled the room before he even spoke. Late 40s. Sharp eyes, restless hands. The kind of guy who used to walk into meetings with a smile that said, "I've got this." But that day the smile was missing, and so was the ground beneath his feet. He told me he'd been having panic attacks. Not every day, but often enough to scare him. He was waking up at night gasping, heart racing, mind spinning like a ceiling fan with a broken switch. At first he thought it was just stress, but it wasn't going away. And truthfully, he had every reason to feel the way he did. His once thriving business had taken hit after hit during COVID. And unlike some lucky sectors, the market hadn't bounced back. A major project had collapsed, leaving him overexposed. Investors were circling, not with support, but with pressure. Calls, deadlines, questions he didn't always have answers to. And while he had once been the life of every party, chemically enhanced or not, that part of his story was over. He'd swapped the drugs, the alcohol, the 3-day highs for protein shakes and green smoothies. He went clean. He got strong. But sobriety came with a quiet cost, a dramatically smaller circle. Turns out, when your fun stops including hangovers and self-destruction, some friends stop calling. So now his evenings were quiet. Too quiet. Alone on the couch. Thinking. Endlessly thinking. About the company. About his bank account. About what kind of man he was becoming. And what kind of future he could still build. The only time the noise stopped, the only true pause, was when his 5-year-old daughter came to stay. She brought light into the room the way only kids can. Innocent, unfiltered joy. Those little eyes full of questions and wonder. In those moments, he forgot about the debt, the deals, the deadlines. For a day or two, he remembered how to breathe again. But as soon as she went back to her mother, the silence returned, and with it, the spiral. What if her mother decides to move abroad with her new boyfriend? What if I can't afford the child support next month? What if I have to fight for custody and I lose? What if I'm not enough? The nights got longer, the sleep got thinner, and the questions got louder. This wasn't just burnout. This was survival mode with a tie on. A man with nowhere to land running out of sky. And that's where our conversation began. Not with tactics, not with breathing exercises, not even with the panic, but with the question underneath it all. What happens when everything you used to hold on to, your success, your confidence, your people, your pace, no longer holds you back? What do you grab when your hands are empty and your heart's still racing? As we spoke more, it became clear that the business problems weren't actually the problem. They were loud, yes. Stressful, absolutely. But they were also a convenient disguise. Something to obsess over while avoiding the thing that really hurt. Something tangible to fix. So he didn't have to face what couldn't be fixed with effort alone. Because yes, going from financial comfort to barely covering your monthly bills is no small thing. Carrying debt when you used to carry influence, that hits. That bruises the ego in places few things can reach. But most people survive that, and he would have too, if that were all it was. But it wasn't. Well, what broke him open was not the money, the business, or the investors. It was a 5-year-old girl, and the woman who gave birth to her, his daughter, bright-eyed, soft-voiced, full of questions and trust, was the only thing that truly kept him anchored. And yet, he only had her part of the time. The rest of the time, she belonged to a woman who didn't just distrust him, She outright despised him, and maybe she had her reasons. She had known him during the wild years, the parties, the substances, the unreliability. She had seen the version of him he no longer was. But in her eyes, he was still that man. A drifter, a charmer. A failed promise in nice shoes, and no matter how hard he worked to become better, he could never quite change the story she told about him. Not in her mind. Not in court. Not in the silences between drop-offs and pickups. In her world, he was a liability she was legally forced to tolerate. An irresponsible mistake in human form. A man she wouldn't trust with a houseplant, let alone a child. She didn't see his sobriety. She didn't see the green juices or early mornings. She didn't care that he'd started again from nothing, with nothing but intention. As far as she was concerned, his failed business was proof that he hadn't changed. His loneliness was deserved. His struggle? Self-inflicted. And that's what cut deepest of all. Because while he had forgiven himself for who he used to be, she hadn't. And because she hadn't, he couldn't relax. Every message from her came laced with judgment. Every conversation felt like a silent evaluation. And in her eyes, he saw a version of himself he desperately wanted to outrun, but couldn't. And that's where the real panic lived. Not in the money, not in the failed project, but in the gnawing fear that he might lose the only thing he had left that truly made him feel worthy. His daughter. And that if her mother ever decided to take her away, there would be nothing he could do to stop it. At some point, we started mapping it out. Not the panic attacks themselves, but the triggers underneath. Not the symptoms, but the system. And what we found was simple on paper, but crushing in reality. He wasn't dealing with one problem, he was carrying 4. And each one on its own could buckle a man's knees. The first was identity. The raw, confronting shift of being seen without the armor. No income to hide behind. No status to deflect with. No parties to use as distraction. Just him. A man trying to rebuild his life from the ground up. With integrity, yes, but without applause. And that is terrifying. Because when the lights go off and the music stops, who are you really? What do you stand for when no one's watching? And no one's impressed? The second was duty. Not the loud kind with shouting bosses or ultimatums, but the quiet, sacred kind, the kind that says, you made a promise. Investors weren't threatening him, but they didn't need to, because he had given his word. And for a man trying to reclaim his honor, walking away wasn't just failure. It was betrayal. He could have run. He could have folded. But every cell in his body told him, hold the line. Show them you're not who you used to be. The third weight was shame, and not the internal kind. This one had a face. His ex. The mother of his child. A woman who remembered his worst years and had frozen him in them. Who treated his growth not as redemption, but as manipulation. To her, his every step forward was a cover-up. His new routines were lies. His calmness was performative. She didn't see a man evolving. She saw a man pretending. And with every raised eyebrow, every cold text, every withheld kindness, she reminded him, you don't deserve trust. Not as a father. Not as a man. Not from me. But the final weight, the one that made his hands shake at night, was fear. Not abstract fear. Specific, living, breathing fear. Fear of conflict. Not because he couldn't argue, but because he knew what she was capable of when pushed. And because in the past, when he wasn't stable, she had played hardball. And now, years later, even though he'd changed, that possibility still lived in the back of his mind. What if I say the wrong thing? What if I set her off? What if she decides I'm not fit to be a father and makes sure I'm treated like one? That's what panic looks like when it's dressed in real life. Not a single loud moment, but 4 constant undercurrents, each pulling in a different direction, all of them demanding silence, compliance, perfection. No mistakes allowed, no space to breathe. And eventually, the body says, enough, not with words, but with sweat, with tight chests, with racing hearts at 2:43 a.m. Because when you carry 4 invisible wars inside you, and you lose even one of them, it feels like you've lost everything. So what's the solution? This is where things get practical and possible, because not all 4 dimensions of stress are equal in weight or in how hard they are to shift. Identity is where we can begin. And the truth is, I can help with that. Because when someone begins to reconnect with who they are, not the performer, not the provider, but the person, stress levels don't just lower a little. They often collapse from a 10 to a 3 or less. A renewed sense of self-worth and confidence works like oxygen. It doesn't fix everything, but it makes everything easier to carry. And once you remember your own value, not the one others give you, but the one you reclaim, everything starts to breathe again. Then there's the financial stress, the debt, the instability, the pressure to hold it all together. And yes, that's real, but it's also part of the game. Every entrepreneur eventually has to learn how to ride the wave of risk, loss, reinvention. It's not easy, but it is learnable. There are tools for that, strategies, habits, perspective. With the right support, that stress becomes something manageable, even motivating. Which leaves us with the 2 most stubborn layers, shame and fear. Shame starts to soften the moment confidence rises. It's like mist burning off in the morning sun. You begin to see things more clearly, forgive yourself more freely, and stop carrying every past version of yourself like a sentence you're still serving. But fear is trickier, because fear requires a choice. And to explain that, I often go back to one of the clearest metaphors I know. The diving board. Picture a small boy standing at the edge of the board for the very first time. The drop is barely half a meter, but to him, it looks like a ravine. The water below feels endless, flat, unforgiving. Meanwhile, all his friends are laughing, jumping, resurfacing with joy, again and again. But for him, the image of that endless fall is louder than the evidence right in front of him, until he jumps. And in less than a second, he lands. Not in disaster, but in cool, refreshing, beautiful water. And before he knows it, he's laughing too, climbing out, ready to do it all over again. That's what fear does. It keeps us stuck in prediction. You predict your ex will always see you as the loser you once were. You predict that if you don't meet everyone's expectations, your life will collapse. You predict punishment where reality might actually offer relief. But once you do the very thing you are afraid of, once you speak the truth, make the call, hold your ground, you finally face the consequences you've been running from. And here's the real surprise. The consequences are almost never as bad as the scenarios you've built in your mind. In fact, if you approach it from a place of honesty, empathy, and emotional steadiness, the outcome is often not just manageable. It's liberating. It's that first jump all over again. Refreshing, grounding, sometimes even joyful. And those panic attacks, they often disappear the moment your nervous system realizes we're not in danger anymore. We're just in motion. Because motion, real, intentional, courageous motion, dissolves fear faster than any thought ever will. If you find yourself standing there, uncertain, your heart pounding, your breath caught somewhere between hesitation and hope, then let me tell you this. You don't need to wait until the fear disappears before you move. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision to act while fear is still in the room. And more often than not, what's waiting for you on the other side of that leap is far gentler, far kinder than the story your mind has been replaying all this time.